At Notre Dame, Good Friday came early, read the Christianity Today headline on Tuesday. Good Friday on Holy Monday. At one of the most well-known Christian cathedrals in all of history. Good Friday, in the form of a destructive fire that completely consumed the wooden roof, obliterating its historic Gothic beauty. Good Friday grief as we watched helplessly while the spire that had reached to the heavens for generations crumbled into a hellish inferno. The world looked on powerless in disbelief, perhaps with similar feelings to those who looked on in powerless disbelief at Jesus bleeding out and suffocating in agony on the cross. It was Holy Monday, the day that we typically remember Jesus cleansing the temple in Jerusalem with a whip and holy wrath. Perhaps some wondered if this was a form of that holy wrath, or was this just tragic coincidence? I imagine only the day before, on a beautiful, breezy Palm Sunday morning, those massive bells rang out as the people gathered for Mass. That powerful pipe organ resonating off the perfectly designed Gothic stone vaults and archways. The memory alone of the magical beauty evoking chills of joy to many who had been in attendance. I can't help but wonder if this is how the ancient Hebrews felt in the presence of the temple in Jerusalem. I can only speculate and wonder, as I myself have never been to Notre Dame. And yet my eyes welled with irresistible tears and my gut knotted in nausea and horror as I bore painful witness to the descent of that formerly beautiful spire, now skeletal and broken, down, agonizingly, into fiery damnation and death. I sense that my brother Matthew captured the perspective well when he pointed out that there is nothing in our own country that can compare with the loss of an 856-year-old holy cathedral. At best, we are children in comparison. Children looking on in helpless horror at this holy place disintegrated into ashes. Ashes. Ashes is how we began this journey. Many of us gathered together in the morning and again in the evening to pause and consider the fatal mortal result of our sinful separation from God's love and life. Ashes marked in the form of a cross as a reminder to ourselves and the world of how tragic and horrific a cost was paid to restore us. Ashes began our journey through a season of prayer, serious contemplation, and self-denial. And now ashes are bookending that season as an iconic holy place in the shape of a cross herself took on her own ashen cross for all to see. Ash and deathly debris that she is probably wearing still today, instead of the trumpet calls and the bright gathering throngs celebrating joyful Easter resurrection. Ashes were in the beginning. Ashes were not supposed to be in the end game. Ashes are grief and sorrow. Ashes were certainly grief and sorrow for our family as we gathered almost exactly 1 year ago for the opening night of a much-anticipated movie, Avengers: Infinity War. I remember scraping by as payday approached, and Megan scrounged up enough for all of us to go together for a rare opening night showing. That movie famously ended in the ashy disintegration and death of half of the universe's population. We weren't prepared. We were traumatized. We haven't trusted Marvel Studios since we endured watching our favorite characters disintegrate into ash. And in 5 days, the Avengers return to the theater for their own endgame. I don't think we're likely to go again on opening weekend. Our hope is that this endgame will bring new life from the ashes that we've lingered in this past year, the confusion, grief, and mistrust. We'll probably wait. Maybe we'll be more prepared. Maybe we're not good enough comic geeks to have understood what was going on in the first place. The tickets are probably sold out anyway as the world flocks to the theater for, more punishment and suffering? Suffering and grief? But it's just a movie, right? Many have said it's just a church. Sure, it's old, but it's just a building. The church isn't a building. The church is the people, and nobody was killed in the fire, right? It's just a building. It's just a movie. It's just, maybe he was just a man. Maybe it was just 3 days. Maybe it's not just a building. It's not just a church. It's not even just a cathedral. Notre Dame de Paris is a symbol, an icon, an anchor, if you will. It is significant. The gravity of Notre Dame, especially in this tragedy, drew together people of all faiths, of no faith. Historians, architects, theologians, mystics, authors, tourists, people gathered around to sing hymns like Ave Maria in videos that went viral around the world as she burned. She captured the attentions of a busy world. Far too busy for pestering things like church and faith and religion. But Notre Dame burned, and everyone paused. Millions of unlikely people gave witness. Millions of people responded. Prayers were offered. Restoration money was offered. I don't know what's happening in that great cathedral this morning, but I know what's happening around the world because of that great cathedral. People are paying attention. Hearts are softened again. Questions are being asked, and conversations are being had. Destruction and death are being considered. But they are being considered through the lens of hope. You see, just like a mighty forest laid low by a sweeping wildfire, new life springs from the ashes. Bright flowers and saplings rising defiantly from the ashy grayness of destruction and death. Hope is mighty. And anyone who knows anything about St. Walker and Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps can tell you that hope, joined with will, is the most powerful human force in the universe. Mighty forests grow new trees from the ashes. Mighty cathedrals are rebuilt over the ashes. Ashes. We ourselves rise above the despair of our own ashes. Ashes of destroyed faith. Ashes of burned relationships. Ashes of disintegrating finances and resources. Ashes of grief and loss. Ashes of our own selfish and prideful nature. From all these ashes, we can be renewed and reborn into new life again. Better life. Greater life. More abundant and eternal life. New life springs from the ashes because Notre Dame isn't just a building, just a church. New life springs from the ashes of our lives because Jesus isn't just a man. Yeshua Bar Joseph of Nazareth in Galilee was a man. He walked the earth in the first century under the rule of an empire that offered peace by the sword, and an emperor who claimed to be the Son of God. But Yeshua, Jesus, as we more commonly know him, was more than just a man. He was fully a man, a human being in nature, in need, and in life like you or me. But he was also fully God, equal in power and majesty and worthy in worship and adoration with the Father and the Spirit. And because Jesus is fully human and fully God, Jesus is the only one whose life, death, and resurrection is sufficient to claim victory over death, victory over our mortal ashes. Christus Victor. Christ is victorious. Christ is triumphant over death, sin, and the powers of evil in our world and in our lives. By his own life, death, and resurrection, Jesus destroys death and leaves it in the ashes. By taking our place and leading the way forward, Jesus liberates us from the bondage of suffering, sin, and death that have held humanity captive ever since the first fall. He's held humanity in his arms the entire way. We may have begun this season, even our very lives, covered in the ash of death and destruction, suffering, and mortality, but we do not end in ashes. Superhero movies may end in the ash of death, but we do not. Jesus isn't a fallible, struggling superhero of our own design. Christ is not discouraged or confused by death as some of our heroes may be. The eternal Son has the power to destroy death and liberate us from the bondage of its destructive power. The grave no longer holds us. It no longer holds our loved ones. Death has no claim over us, for that ransom has been paid and that victory has been won. I believe that Notre Dame de Paris will rise again. I believe that her spire will once more rise to the heavens. The flaming inferno of death and destruction will not claim her. And she will once again be an anchoring foundation of the faith and a symbol of our enduring strength in the face of a broken and hurting world, just as our own Gothic church endures. With its beautiful white spire reaching into the heavens above, pointing the people of Greenville to eternal hope. We are stewards of history, stewards of this building, stewards of the gospel good news handed down to us, stewards of life and love and hope for a world and a community in desperate need. The first evangelists and preachers of that good news of new life were women: Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them. Unfortunately, the men did not believe them. So I'm grateful to be part of a denomination and a faith tribe who affirms the full equality of that role for women. I am encouraged to be part of a congregation who embraces the hope of that good news, that gospel good news for all people everywhere, no matter who they are. On the same day that Notre Dame de Paris burned, there was also a smaller fire in Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. And in the days before, 3 historically black churches in St. Landry Parish, Louisiana, were burned by arson. In each case, hope is springing from destruction. Need is being realized and resources are being directed toward rebuilding. Other places of death and destruction and need are seeing renewed attention. Fears of scarcity are being replaced with the abundance of love, because fear and death cannot stand in the face of perfect love that restores us to life, new life that springs from the ashes, and we are heirs to that same hope. We are messengers of that hope. So I encourage you to hear as we close the words of Peter in the book of Acts as he declares that gospel good news of Christ. You know the message he sent to the people of Israel, preaching peace by Jesus Christ. He is Lord of all. That message spread throughout Judea, beginning in Galilee after the baptism that John announced. How God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and with power. He went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil, for God was with him. We are witnesses to all that he did both in Judea and Jerusalem. They put him to death by hanging him on a tree, but God raised him on the third day. He commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one ordained by God as judge of the living and the dead. All the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. Therefore, why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. He has risen